Now, yesterday the government unveiled their €9.4 billion budget package for the year ahead.
Now, here to break it down is Economist Dr. Emma Howard, Jack Horgan-Jones, political correspondent with the Irish Times, and Newstalk's Andrea Gilligan. Emma, I'll go to you first. The big, beautiful budget, the burger budget, the Big Mac budget, you call it what it is. Nothing too startling, or are you more disgusted than you were this time yesterday?
It's, they seem to have managed to spend a huge amount of money, more than all of the Fiscal Advisory Council and Central Bank and everyone advised.
They should.
And make very few people happy. I think Jed Nash had the best soundbite yesterday when he said it was a budget for burger barons and big builders. So, it's very clear, I think, from the budget what the government's priorities are. They outlined it as a pro-enterprise budget. And it definitely is, it's in favour of businesses at the expense of, I think, families and child poverty, which is supposed to be another goal of the government, to reduce child poverty. Their target is 3%. We're at 8.5%. And if you take into account housing costs, we've actually got 1 in 5 children living in child poverty in Ireland. And I think there was very little inroads made into that yesterday. The other side of it is that they did remove those one-off cost of living measures. So they've tried, I think, and I counted yesterday, I think Pascal said the word resilient or resilience 5 times in his speech. So they've tried to sort of scale back the giveaways from previous years, but because those one-off measures weren't one-off, they were actually 3 years in a row.
For a few years,
people feel much worse off now as a result of it, even though those one-off measures we know have been feeding inflation and have actually really had a negative impact overall on average. So
but people felt they were helping. Jack, I mean, for our viewers watching in this morning, let's talk about how it's going to affect them. And I suppose tax cuts, and we were seeing that over the last couple of years, that middle income were getting tax bands increased and tax cuts. Nothing yesterday.
Nothing yesterday. A very small adjustment on the USC to reflect the change in the minimum wage, just to make sure that there's no tax hit for those on the minimum wage, which will benefit everyone to a very small extent. But you're right, that kind of indexation process around the bands and rates, that didn't happen yesterday. And that is, as Emma has said, a result of the choices that are elsewhere in the tax package. So you take the three VAT cuts on restaurants, on the electricity, the utility bills, and I've forgotten the third one, but there's 3 big VAT cuts in there. You add those up, you take the R&D tax credit and you take the renters tax credit. It adds up to over €1 billion. There wasn't any money left to do anything else substantial there. You might have been able to do a very small income tax package, but in the end, Pascal Donoghue ended up giving away some of his tax room for manoeuvre and making more room for some small spending increases elsewhere. So that's the result of choices that the government has made.
So over the years, Leo Varadkar going, we have to look after these middle-income people. There seemed to be nothing there yesterday, Andrea,
there's very little there.
That middle income, those families are going out to work. We're getting nothing.
No, and in actual fact, like when you even listening to the 2 speeches yesterday afternoon, you're probably, the squeeze middle that you talk about, Alan, they're actually probably worse off now as a result of this budget, because while they might have had last year changes of somewhere between, I think, was it €2,000 to €3,000 when you took in the one-off payments and changes to the income tax band, the fact now that we effectively, there's no real change as such this year, it's kind of more tweaks, and there is, as Jack pointed out, that kind of trimming to the USC. It's going to mean that kind of squeeze middle are absolutely going to feel worse off in this budget, because when you took in those electricity credits of €150, and as you said, they weren't one-off, they came in over the course of 2 and 3 years, that had a massive impact on households with maybe, your 2 parents, your 2 or 3 kids, your average income earner, and now that's gone. And that's going to be, hugely felt, especially when you consider the cost of actually turning on the light, the cost of turning on your heat, the increases to that overall that households are feeling. So, I think it's not just the squeeze middle, the middle income earners. I think a lot of people at home watching today, the viewers, are going to feel that this budget really hasn't done an awful lot for them. And it's not that they didn't gain anything. they've lost really those one-off credits.
Emma, they spent so much money though. Where has it gone if everyone's miserable about it? I mean, is anyone happy off the back of this, apart from big builders and perhaps restaurateurs?
And the Restaurant Federation yesterday came out and said that they weren't actually very happy.
No, because they were talking about the minimum wage. I mean, you're giving them this thing. This annoyed me yesterday. Yeah. So they're getting this VAT decrease, and yet they're giving out about minimum wage. So the people who are working in those shops, in the kitchens, they're sweeping up floors, serving tables, are getting a little bit extra, and they're still giving out.
Yep, and that's what we saw yesterday. Yeah, so I mean, I think
they're not even happy. So who is?
So they, it's been delayed, and again, I think this is a kind of fiscal gimmickry from the government. They've delayed it to July to try and downplay the full cost of it. So they're only going to be spending, I think, about 232 million on this next year. But the following year, the full cost kicks in, and that comes up closer to 700 million is the cost. Yeah, but we've got so we had the big VAT cuts, as Jack said, across the electricity credits, the VAT on new house purchases, and on the hospitality sector.
And apartment buildings?
For new apartments. Now, when we look at the new apartment VAT cuts, we did have a slump in apartment building last year of about 24%.
And why was that? Materials cost, that's what they're saying.
Partly apartments are the most expensive to deliver. So that's one reason why. Again, planning delays comes into it. We've got lots of infrastructure issues. But one of the organisations that was happy yesterday, so a lot of the construction industry were happy with this VAT cut, which perhaps says its own story.
Oh, I'm getting flashbacks.
But the echoes back to
industry were happy.
Echoes back to the Celtic Tiger housing boom. Yeah, but look, it's possible that those VAT cuts are going to mean that those kind of marginal, where it's not quite, it's on the edge of being economically viable to build, it could get them over the line. And it's also possible that some of those, and I did hear some of the industry today saying it could lead to lower apartment costs of up to €70,000. So if some of those cuts are passed on to consumers, that would be welcome.
If they're passed on.
If they're passed on, and that's it's to be seen.
It's to be seen. Jack, we were saying there are no one-off measures like that we've seen over the last couple of years. But what supports were put in place yesterday?
Well, one of the big VAT cuts that we're talking about is the extension, really, of something that was already in place. That's the reduced rate of VAT on gas and electricity bills. So we
were experiencing that already.
Yes, that was due to expire at the end of this year, but they've extended it across next year. Now, that's a pretty expensive measure, actually.
Is it?
And I think in a relative sense, compared to what we've been saying already this morning about the income effect of those once-off measures in recent years, it won't be felt, but it is still quite expensive, and that kind of captures a lot of what's being done in this budget. Even though they're spending a lot more, the lived experience of households up and down the country is going to be one of greater difficulty, higher levels of deprivation, more difficult to make ends meet over the Christmas. And that large amount of money that they're spending, the 9.4 billion overall, it's being spread quite thinly. So while they have made progress on things like the fuel allowance, they've changed both the rate and the eligibility, so more people will come in.
Yeah, it's not 34,000 people more will be eligible for it.
But it's not a dramatic increase, and it won't be enough to offset that impact of stripping out the once-off cost of living measures. They've also made progress on some of the big programme for government commitments, like around getting rid of the means test for carers benefit. They've made little step on that. But again, this kind of brand of the budget is cautious incrementalism. It's not big bang and it's not flashy. And they've also failed to make progress on some of the big programme for government commitments. So things like putting up the renter's tax credit. They've extended it, but they haven't put it up. Things like making big progress on childcare. They've really thrown not a huge amount at childcare.
Like that.
And they've promised, they've made one of the biggest promises, which is to bring it down to €200 per month per child. They've not made progress on that.
Andrea, you hear what people are on the cold face or are facing every day, the people are talking to day by day. Is anything in this budget of benefit to them, or has the hospitality thing just knocked everything out of the water for them, do you think?
I think the hospitality is probably the story that's going to dominate in many respects today, because while there was such a strong lobby campaign, particularly after the last budget and even in the general election as well, from those in the hospitality industry, you know, they've still managed to disgruntle an awful lot in the sector, because the 9% VAT cut is going to apply to basically the food service industry and the hairdressing businesses as well. And I think what an awful lot of the viewers would probably be, you know, a little bit kind of stunned and surprised at yesterday evening or yesterday afternoon when the budget was announced, and even today as you begin to digest it, is that, you know, you take, for instance, your McDonald's on Grafton Street in Dublin, right? Really busy spot. They're going to be eligible for this 9% VAT cut. Similarly, you look at your local pub in Connemara in County Galway that perhaps has no other community services within the area. You know, it's probably the hub for, you know, to try and curb isolation.
The centre of the community.
It is the centre of the community. And like, I have family in the business, so I'm kind of acutely aware of this, but like, they won't be eligible for the 9% VAT cut unless they're actually dishing out food every day to customers. And yeah, there's a lot of the different trade union groups yesterday are even very critical of the VAT reduction and the cost of, you know, of actually implementing it when you look at some of the other public services that could be provided. But they've still managed to actually, you know, antagonise those in the hospitality industry even with this, because now what they've done is, as opposed to applying the VAT rate to the hospitality sector, they picked one particular element of it. So it's not your hotel rooms, unless you're a hotel.
Well, thank God it's not the hotel rooms, because there was an uproar if the hotel rooms got it yesterday.
And it's not the rural pub, but if you're a franchise in a food outlet that, you know, is whatever your profits are, and albeit a lot of those, you know, big chains and fast food outlets are operated on a franchise, but they will be eligible for this. And I think that's going to be one of the talking points today. The other talking point, just as Jack mentioned there, you know, around the carers. Like, I spoke to carers in the show yesterday, even in advance of the budget. And they kind of actually had a bit of a broad welcome for this to one extent, in the sense that, you know, it is going to change the income disregard for the carers allowance. There is going to be some change to that. So that's seen as a positive. But if you're a carer at home this morning watching this, you know, you're getting an extra, is it €10? Isn't it €10 is going to be the increase to the carers allowance, which a full-time carer works out at about 6 cents an hour. That's their increase. So they're, you know, they're obviously very annoyed about that, but at the same time, they do welcome that income, the increase in the income disregard. And just to pick up on the fuel allowance point, I think that is still means tested, isn't it, for those on the carers allowance as well. So, like, while, you know, you're getting an extra tenner,
you give it and you take it away.
You know, there's no increase in the fuel for them. So that's going to be an issue.
You're going to stay with us because we've lots more still to talk about. We'd love to hear your views at home. What did you think of yesterday's budget? Are you worse off? Are you better off? Let us know your situation. 0896 111 111.